In 1803, Napoleon pointed to a map and said, "Here lies a sleeping giant, let him sleep, for when he awakes, he will shake the world." In 2012, former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger wrote a book titled On China, in which he argued that China's two-century decline was merely a brief historical anomaly, not the norm. Are these two examples carefully chosen by China to boost national confidence? Not really. Western nations struggle to comprehend China's mode of existence, and they find it perplexing how China has been able to endure for so long. In this video, we will delve into the topic of whether China is a nation or a civilization and discuss the following. Powerful empires in European history. Long-lasting unity. China, the civilization disguised as a nation, making the world marvel. Throughout history, China has consistently been a formidable central empire. However, powerful empires weren't unique to China, as Western nations also saw central empires that surpassed China at various times. The Roman Empire, Persian Empire, Macedonian Empire, Byzantine Empire, and Ottoman Empire were all renowned superempires, but these mighty empires were transient in nature. Even the later British Empire, on which the sun never set, eventually declined. In the world, there are no empires that remain perpetually powerful, they rise and fall. But when European empires crumbled, they truly fell, and there was no resurgence. Not only did they disintegrate, but the people of these empires had little interest in reunification and restoring the former glory of the empire. The descendants of the Roman Empire did not consider themselves Romans, nor did they have any desire to revive the Roman Empire. Germanic peoples fought for their own nations, not for the Roman Empire. The national cultures of Europe are primarily tied by blood relations, or in more favorable cases, religious divisions. Each ethnicity aims to establish its own nation, and people with different religious beliefs are often at odds. This is the current state of Europe. Throughout history, unity followed by division has been a recurring pattern. However, in Europe, the divisions lasted longer, and the times of unified Europe were few and not recognized by the various European nations. They all claim to have been conquered and invaded by this powerful empire. The divisive forces in Europe were exceptionally strong. Take, for instance, the British Empire on which the sun never set. At one point, nearly half the world was under British rule. But after its collapse, no one longed for the British Empire. Even right on their doorstep, in Ireland, there was a push for independence. What's even more amusing is that the Irish believed that the British exploited and brutally oppressed them, and they thought that gaining independence would lead to better days. On the other hand, the English believed the Irish were lazy and impoverished, burdening the UK, and that getting rid of them would allow the English to lead better lives. So, even right on their doorstep, the British couldn't hold on to Ireland and ended up splitting it forcibly. After the division, the Irish felt content in their newfound independence, and the English believed they were better off without the Irish. Neither side had any interest in reunification. This is a situation the Chinese people completely fail to understand. In contrast to Europe, which has experienced long-term fragmentation and brief periods of unity, China, while also subject to cycles of unity and division, has been characterized by long-term unity and brief periods of division. China has established numerous dynasties, each with its own rise and fall. However, after the decline and fall of each dynasty, whether a new regional power emerged in Sichuan or Hunan, their mission was to unify the entire country. For over thousands of years, China has remained unified for more than 90% of the time, forming a cohesive, supersized empire. This is something that greatly perplexes Westerners. It seems almost magical. Westerners not only have a history of division but also, as they ventured abroad and colonized the world, they encountered a global landscape made up of fragmented small nations. Even India, which may seem massive today, was divided into numerous warring principalities before British colonialism. While there have been several large, multi-ethnic, ancient civilizations around the world, only China has maintained long-term unity and stands as the sole exception. Western thought and cultural systems fundamentally struggle to explain this historical fact of China's prolonged great unity. In response, Western scholars proposed a theory. China isn't a nation, it's a civilization disguised as a nation. The Clash of Civilizations, Samuel Huntington. Because China is essentially a civilization, it has endured. In contrast, European empires are merely nations, and therefore, they will ultimately decline. The extraordinary aspect of China is that throughout its history, each dynasty acknowledges itself as China. After the fall of one dynasty, no matter where the new regional power emerges, whether in Sichuan or Hunan, they declare themselves as the rightful inheritors of the previous dynasty's legacy and not as founders of a new nation. In simple terms, whoever wins becomes China, and whoever becomes emperor becomes a Chinese. This is China's tradition, and every new dynasty is obliged to recognize the legitimacy of the previous one, thus establishing their own legitimacy as the most lawful successors of the former dynasty. Why have successive dynasties insisted on acknowledging themselves as China rather than establishing a new nation? This takes us back to Emperor Qin Shi Huang. Ing Zheng was truly the first emperor. Although his time of unification was brief, shorter even than the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire, he left behind a profoundly valuable legacy system. The Qin dynasty set a precedent, and the emperors that followed strictly adhered to this system, reinforcing it for over 2,000 years, ultimately forming China's unique tradition. Mao Zedong once said, "For 100 generations, we followed Qin politics and law." European empires, however, never had emperors who accomplished this, and therefore, they failed to establish their own tradition. Europe is held together by blood ties and religious affiliations, while China is bound by its shared culture. China might experience temporary declines, but it never truly vanishes. That's the reason. The Qin Empire, Han Empire, Tang Empire, Song Empire, Yuan Empire, Ming Empire, Qing Empire, these were originally different powerful empires, but within Chinese culture, they are all considered China. They merely had different emperors. Other nations rise and fall, but China is different. China doesn't talk about rising, it has always been at the peak, just occasionally declining, but it always revives. This is the perspective of Napoleon, Henry Kissinger, and mainstream European intellectuals. Around the world, this is one of a kind. No other nation has the level of cohesion that China possesses. A single province can rival an entire European country. Cantonese and Hubei people, for instance, can't even communicate in their respective dialects. In Europe, they'd practically be considered two separate ethnic groups. But in China, they firmly identify as Chinese. If you were to suggest to them that they should establish two separate countries to lead happier lives, they'd probably stare at you as if you were a fool. Europeans can't fathom why China's numerous provinces can still recognize each other. Likewise, Chinese people can't understand why, right next to England, Ireland has been closely linked for centuries yet cheerfully split into two countries, believing that division would lead to greater happiness. In terms of national integration and unity of the people, Chinese culture undoubtedly takes the top spot. If a country lacks internal cohesion and a sense of identity, it's only a matter of time before it fractures. But China is different. From the northeast to Hainan Island, everyone within this vast stretch of land unhesitatingly identifies as Chinese. This leaves Westerners utterly flabbergasted. Out of self-preservation, they won't attribute it to their own inadequacy but will instead regard China as a monster. The world is filled with fragmented smaller nations, so why is China so unified that it's almost terrifyingly massive? This is the legacy of China, its culture, a unique heritage left by history. Jealousy won't change the reality, and even if you understand how this came about, replicating it would take at least 1,000 years. Chinese culture is highly inclusive. Once you acknowledge Chinese culture, you become Chinese, regardless of bloodline or religion. If the world ever unifies, China will undoubtedly be the unifying force. Because no matter how strong other nations may be, they can't achieve unity. Even if they occupy half the globe, they'll immediately fracture upon the slightest decline, and these fragmented countries won't have any intention of reunifying. The UK and the US share common ancestry and culture, but the UK has no intention of unifying with the US, and the US has no intention of unifying with the UK. China, however, is different. When new generations are exposed to Chinese civilization, after a few generations, they can immediately inherit a tradition that spans 2,000 years and strongly embrace the concept of unity. This kind of strength is eternal. That's the allure of Chinese civilization. This is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. We genuinely appreciate your support.